folks, it's Pastor Russ. Hope everybody's doing well today. I have two important videos that I'm doing today, but I'm going to separate them actually into two because they're dealing with two completely different topics, and I want everybody to be able to listen to both if you don't have time. That way it can be split up and you can do it at your convenience. But there are a couple things going on that we need to address. One is kind of negative, one is also very positive. So I'm going to do the negative one first because it seems to be a bit more pressing. We need to discuss as Christians and as our church what we see happening right now in our country. You've no doubt seen the news reports of the rioting that is going on all over the nation and the connection that is made to the death of this man in Milwaukee. We cannot, and I am certainly not, justifying what happened to this man. It was horrific. It should never ever have happened. And the fact that it happened at the hands of a law enforcement officer only makes it that more egregious and tragic. But we need to understand, and I don't know where you may be getting your news. I have done a lot of research on what's going on from multiple sources, so I feel confident that what I'm telling you is the truth. And if you need more information, I'd be happy to give you a list of those sources so you can check it out for yourself. The police officer that was directly involved in this man's death was fired and has been charged with murder. He will be tried. The other 3 police officers that were on the scene have been fired, and potential charges can still be brought against them should the investigation lead in that direction. So what I'm saying is, this was a terrible, horrible thing that happened, but our justice system is working. Nobody got off, nobody got away with anything. And this police officer that's been charged with murder, at this point we don't know if what happened was racially motivated or if this cop was just a thug. He apparently has had several brutality complaints on his record over the years. So again, we don't know that yet. If people are assuming that, they don't know either. The investigation is happening at the city, state, and federal level. So this is not going to be swept away or washed under the bridge. There will be justice. So we need to understand that the government is responding properly to a horrible situation. Okay, that's fact number 1. Fact number 2. We have a grand tradition in this country of political protest. It's part of the First Amendment, the right to free speech, the right to redress of grievances, the right to petition our government. Those are all things that we have exercised as citizens from the very beginning of this nation. It was codified into our Constitution in the Bill of Rights to guarantee that we would have those rights. People do have the right to stand on street corners and hold signs and chant and engage people in telling their opinions, even if they're angry, even if those opinions are negative. People have the right to march through towns in protest. People have the right to send letters to their representatives. They have the right to visit them and express their opinions. They have the right to do editorials and appear in interviews on TV and social media. All of these things are good, all of these things are perfectly legal, and all of these things are truly American. And we have seen them in operation many times, even in our own lifetime, when things have happened. So those things are good, even if we may disagree or agree with those who are doing the protesting. But we live in a society where everyone is guaranteed the right to express their opinion. Some of that is happening, and locally, thank God, that's what did happen so far. It has been peaceful, it has been non-destructive, it has been people expressing their opinions. Third, what we have seen all across this nation is not protest. It is crime. When somebody picks up a brick, a stone, a piece of wood, and smashes a store window, that's not protest. That's crime. When a group breaks into Target and steals TVs and iPhones and all kinds of other things, that's not protest. That's crime. When people set fire to police vehicles and buildings and burn down businesses, that's not protest. That's crime. And we need to make sure that we differentiate that. I don't care about feelings in this respect. There is no justification for doing that, especially against people who had absolutely nothing to do with what happened in Milwaukee. We do not live in a society where groups are punished for the actions of individuals. That's not biblical. As Christians, we don't do that, and it's not in our Constitution. So anybody who feels the moral justification for looting and stealing other people's property is a fool and a criminal. And we cannot tolerate that, or our society will be torn to shreds shortly. Now, what has happened in many places all over the country over the last few days. It seems to be organized. We don't know that, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But when the riots first broke out in Milwaukee, one of the things that also happened is the city government was hit with a cyber attack. They were hacked. Their systems went down. They couldn't coordinate what they were trying to do. Somebody beyond just the people on the street was organizing what happened in order to do that. It was not coincidental. It couldn't have been. We have other instances where in some of the major cities, pallets of bricks and stones were just put on street corners by unknown people that were conveniently available for rioters to use, to throw at police, to throw at store windows. In, I believe it was Philadelphia, a mounted police officer's horse was struck in the muzzle and injured very seriously by somebody who threw a brick. We've seen the police cars in many different cities burned. In New York City, 2 lawyers, believe it or not, were arrested trying to burn a police car to throw what they call a Molotov cocktail, which is basically an alcohol bottle with a fuse that we're going to light and throw and have it explode. 2 lawyers did that, or accused of that, I should say. And we're seeing all kinds of horrible things happen in Philadelphia. Several state police cars were burned. And guess what, folks? Who do you think is going to pay for that damage? It's not going to be the rioters. It's going to be Pennsylvania taxpayers, you and I. So let's differentiate between the necessity to protest what we believe was a wrong versus those who are using this to create anarchy, to steal and become criminals outright. And if this is not stopped, our society will suffer greatly. In Washington, D.C., protesters defaced several of our national monuments, spraying them with graffiti, including the World War II memorial. Anybody who's a veteran should be outraged at that kind of behavior. We saw that protesters tried to storm the White House. Several Secret Service agents have been injured, from what I understand. The president was moved to the safety bunker under the White House for fear that they might get through. To this point, law enforcement has been very restrained, and in some cities they haven't done anything. They've just let the cities burn. In Oakland, California, a federal police officer, I forget which branch he's with, was murdered in one of the Oakland riots. And the National Guard has come online now finally because it's gotten out of control. And I guarantee you there probably will be some deaths, tragically. But we're dealing with an organized resistance that hates America, that doesn't care about what happened to this poor man in Milwaukee. They're using this to further their own agenda. They are terrorists. And they're using the young and uninformed, the easily manipulated, to do their bidding. We see that. The vast majority of the people who are involved in these violent riots are young men, although there are some young women too. And they come from all different creeds, colors, backgrounds. It's not just one group versus another. But they all have this left-wing ideology that says there is no God, there should be no freedom, there should only be socialism or communism. Now that's very blunt, I realize that, but that's exactly what is happening. And we as a church, we need to pray for this whole situation. We need to pray for the family of this poor man that was killed. We need to pray for justice to be done in the lives of the police officers that did this brutal thing and their families. We need to pray for all police officers and law enforcement officers for safety, because they're now targets of these mobs, and they may be forced into a situation where they have to pull the trigger to stop somebody from what they're doing, to protect themselves, to protect lives and properties. Many people who have not been involved in this at all have been beaten up, brutalized, whether store owners or just people walking down the street. We need to pray for them, that they are healed and they're okay. We need to pray for the people who've lost businesses, that they can rebuild and restore, because they've already been hurting because of this shutdown with this virus. So we need to keep praying for that. We need to pray for calm. And we need to pray for the truth in all of this to come out, because lies and deception are the tools of the enemy to destroy our nation and our faith. It's no accident that close to the White House, a historic church by the name of St. John's, I believe it's Episcopal, was set fire to by the protesters. So there's and what in the world does that have anything to do with government or anything to do with this man who was killed? Nothing. It is just hatred for God. It is pure evil. And we need to pray against that. We need to pray that these people come to repentance so that they don't end up suffering a worse fate, both here in this world and in the next. I'm sorry if this is not how you're used to hearing me talk, but this is something we must address as the church. We can't cower. We can't justify what they're doing. We can't pretend that it's not happening. We need to look at what is really going on. And again, if you have heard none of this from the news sources you watch or listen to or read, then please go beyond them and look to others, because we don't always get the truth from just a few of the mainstream media sources. Now, in this age of the internet, we have people on the streets with their cameras that they can go live stream and instantly show you what's happening. And a lot of that is in these other news sources that we can see. You can see for yourself. It's not an opinion given to you by a commentator. You can look and see the truth for yourself. And that's all I'm asking people to do here. Now, let me not conclude this video without giving some scripture. Romans 13, Paul discusses the proper role of government and our proper response to it. He says in Romans 13, beginning at verse 1, "Every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. Therefore it is necessary to be in subjection, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience's sake. For conscience sake, For because of this you also pay taxes, for rulers are servants of God, devoting themselves to this very thing. Render to all what is due them. Tax to whom tax is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor." Paul lays this out very clearly. The government we've been given comes from God. He has blessed this nation greatly in that we citizens create the government. We have the constitutional framework. Our ancestors approved it and said, yes, this will be our guide. All the states have created their own constitutions, but within that framework that people have accepted, there is always the ability to change if enough people vote to change it. We have the ability to elect our rulers. We have the ability to remove them from office. We have the ability to speak out against things that we don't agree with that they're doing. So we have been given unprecedented freedom over government that most people in all of human history have never had. And what Paul is saying here is government is legitimate. Its role is to do good, not evil. And if you do evil, you should be afraid. Now, if we have government that starts to do evil, then it's our responsibility as Christian citizens to change that. That was one of the arguments made in the Declaration of Independence as to why we wanted to break away from Great Britain, because of the abuses of the British government on the colonists. At any rate, we're not perfect. Our nation has never been perfect, but we're a whole lot better than anything else. Anywhere that those who espouse what these people running through the streets now throwing rocks are saying, this communist utopia they're trying to create, anywhere that has been tried in the world has led to murder, oppression, death, genocide, sometimes starvation. It does not work because it spits in God's face. It says there is no God, we're going to make the state God, and those of us who are ruling in the state are greater than anybody else. That's not America. It should never be America, and we need to make sure that it doesn't become America. Please pray for our leaders, our president and his people, our governors and their people, the local large city mayors, that they will make the right decision to maintain law and order. If there are grievances, then yes, let them be heard. If there's peaceful protest, let it happen. But the minute somebody picks up a rock and hurls it at a window or at a police officer or at a car or a police officer's horse or just somebody walking down the sidewalk, protest has ended and crime has started. And that has to be stopped. So let's keep that in mind. No matter what happens here, we have to have law and order if we're going to have a free society. And that's what has to happen, so let's support that. Again, please say a special prayer for all of our police officers, because 99.9999% of them are honest, decent men and women. There will always be some bad ones, but the rest are honest and decent, and they deserve our respect and our support, and possibly even our protection here. I saw one situation where a group of people who were there to peacefully protest surrounded a single police officer who had gotten separated from the rest of his group. They surrounded him to protect him from the violent looters and protesters so they couldn't get at him. That's what being an American is all about right there. Even though they were there to protest the death of this man, they didn't hold this other police officer from a completely different city responsible for something he didn't do. That's what America is about. It is about real justice and about real truth, about real fairness. So again, I'm sorry if this is a little different than what you're used to hearing, but if you agree with what I'm saying, please feel free to share this video with anybody else, and please keep our nation and this whole situation in your prayers, that it can come to a peaceful conclusion and those who are agitating to destroy our country can be brought to justice and they can be removed from our society. And also let's pray that justice is done for the family of this poor man who died in Milwaukee. Thank you for listening.